going to learn about histology of spinal cord, cerebrum and cerebellum. Gray and white matter of spinal cord. When we are taking a section through the spinal cord or through any part of the brain that's showing a certain region that appears a whitish and other they have a darker grayish color. These constitute white and gray matter respectively. The microscopic examination shows that the cell bodies of neurons are located only in the gray matter that also contain dendrites and axons starting from or ending on the cell bodies. Most of the fibers within the gray matter are unmyelinated. The spinal cord is the most important content of the vertebral canal. The upper end of the spinal cord becomes continuous with the medulla oblongata. The lowest part of the spinal cord, which is conical in appearance, and it is called as conus medullaris. The conus is continuous below with a fibrous cord-like structure which is called as phylum terminale. When we are taking a transverse section of the gray matter of the spinal cord, that forming an edge-shaped mass. In each half of the cord, the gray matter is divided into a large ventral mass, the anterior or ventral gray column, and a narrow elongated posterior or dorsal gray column. In some part of the spinal cord, a small lateral projections of gray matter is seen between the ventral and dorsal column. This is called as the lateral gray column. The gray matter of the right and left halves of the spinal cord is connected across the midline by a gray commissure that is traversed by the central canal. The central canal of the spinal cord, which contains cerebrospinal fluid. The canal is lined by ependymal cells. The white matter of the spinal cord is divided into right and left half, in front by a deep anterior median fissure and behind by the posterior median septum. Each half of the cord, the white matter, medial to the dorsal gray column, forms the posterior funiculus or posterior white column. The white matter, medial and ventral to the anterior gray column, forms the anterior funiculus or the anterior white column, while the white matter, lateral to the anterior and the posterior gray column, forms the lateral funiculus. The anterior and lateral funiculi are collectively referred to as the anterolateral funiculus. The white matter of the right and left half of the spinal cord is continuous across the midline through the ventral white commissure, which lies anterior to the gray commissure. The white matter contains tracts, both ascending and descending tracts, or any one of that connects the gray matter at the different levels of the spinal cord. Some tracts ascends into the brainstem. Next, the cerebellar cortex. The cerebellum or the small brain which lies in the posterior cranial fossa. Like the cerebrum, the cerebellum has superficial layer of gray matter and cerebellar cortex. Because of the presence of numerous fissures, the cerebellar cortex which is extensive. The structure of the cerebellar cortex. In striking contrast to the cortex of cerebral hemisphere, the cerebellar cortex has a uniform structure in all parts of the cerebellum. It may be divided into three layers. Those layers are the molecular cell layer, or it is present on the most superficial part. Another layer it is called as Purkinje cell layer, and the third layer it is called as granular layer, which rests on the white matter of cerebellum. The Purkinje cell layers is unusually in that it is contain only one layer of neurons. The cell bodies of these neurons are large and flask shaped. The cells are evenly spaced and dendrites arise from the neck of the flask and passes upwards into the molecular layer. Here it is divides and subdivides to form elaborate dendritic tree. The axons of each Purkinje cells that passes downwards through the granular layer to enter the white matter. The granule cells are very small, numerous spherical neurons that occupies the greater part of granular layer of the cerebellum. The spaces not occupied by them are called as cerebellar islets, and the islands are occupied by the spherical synaptic structures. They are called as glomeruli. Next, the cerebral cortex. The surface of the cerebral hemispheres are not smooth. They show a series of grooves or sulci which are separated by intervening areas that is called as gyri. Some sulci are used to divide each cerebral hemispheres into four major subdivisions. Those are called as lobes. Structure of cerebral cortex. Like other masses of gray matter, the cerebral cortex contains the cell bodies of innumerable numbers of neurons along with their processes, neuroglia, and blood vessels. The neurons are of the various size and shapes. They establish extremely intricate connections with each other and with axons that reaching the cortex from other masses of the gray matter. Neurons in the cerebral cortex. The cortical neurons varying in size, in the shape of their cell bodies, and the length, branching patterns, and orientation of the processes. First one, the most abundant type of cortical neurons are pyramidal cells. About two-thirds of the cortical neurons are pyramidal, and their cell bodies are triangular with an apex generally directed towards the surface of the cerebral cortex. The large dendrites arises from the apex. The other dendrites which arises from the basal angle too. The axons arises from the base of the pyramid. The processes of the pyramidal cells extended vertically through entire thickness of the cerebral cortex and establish numerous synapses. The satellite neurons are relatively small and multipolar. They form about one-third of the total neural population of the cerebral cortex. Under low magnification, their axons are short and ends within the cortex. Their processes extends chiefly in a vertical direction within this cortex, but in the same case, they may be oriented horizontally. In addition to these satellite and the pyramidal neurons, the cortex contains numerous other cells. Laminae of cerebral cortex. On the basis of light microscope preparation stained by the method in which the cell bodies are displayed. The laminae of cerebral cortex are arranged in plexiform or molecular layer, external granular layer, pyramidal cell layer, internal granular layer, ganglionic layer, and the multiform layers. The plexiform layer, which is made up of predominantly the fibers, although a few cells are present. All remaining layers containing both satellite and pyramidal neurons as well as other type of neurons. The external and internal granular layers are made up of predominantly of satellite or granular cells. The predominant neurons of the pyramidal layer and in the ganglionic layer are pyramidal. The largest pyramidal cells or giant pyramidal cells of beds are found in the ganglionic cell layer. The multiform cell layer contains cells of various size and shapes. In addition to the cell bodies of neurons, the cerebral cortex contains abundant nerve fibers. Many of these are vertically oriented.